Hello everyone, let's go over lab exercise 1. This is the endocrine system. Let's identify the different glands. This labeled number 1, this is the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, it is a bilobed gland and it is hanging from the hypothalamus through this stalk. This stalk is known as infundibulum, which is labeled 4 over here. Now, pituitary gland has two lobes. It has an interior lobe, which is this darker staining labeled number 2, and then it has a posterior lobe. Interior lobe is known as adenohypophysis because it is composed of glandular tissue. And this number 3, it is known as neurohypophysis because it is actually extension of the nervous system, and it is not a true gland. The hormones it secretes, they are actually synthesized in the hypothalamus. The cell bodies of the neurons are present in the hypothalamus, and then the axons of those neurons, they extend into the posterior pituitary, traveling in this infundibulum, and then those hormones are stored in the axons in the posterior pituitary. So when action potential, it travels down those nerve fibers, that hormone is released into the blood. So posterior pituitary, because of this reason, is known as neurohypophysis. Now let's move to the neck. In the neck we have thyroid gland. Thyroid gland, it is a bilobed gland. It is labeled 5 over here. And the two lateral lobes, they are combined with a horizontal band in the middle, which is known as isthmus. In this diagram you cannot clearly see the horizontal part, but it is kind of horizontal over here. It is labeled number 7. So this is thyroid gland. Thyroid gland has lateral lobes, two lateral lobes, right and left lateral lobe, and an isthmus. On the posterior surface of the thyroid gland, we have parathyroid glands. These labeled number 8 over here. You can see here. These parathyroid glands, they are embedded in the posterior surface of the lateral lobes of the thyroid gland. They are usually 4 to 8 in number. These whitish dots you can see, they are parathyroid glands. Now let's move to the abdomen. In abdomen, labeled number 9, we have adrenal glands. Adrenal glands, we have two adrenal glands located on each side. One is located on top of the right kidney, other is located on top of the left kidney. These adrenal glands, they are kind of triangular in shape, and the outermost covering is the capsule of each adrenal gland. Inside the capsule there is cortex, and then inside the cortex there is medulla. So this labeled number 10, the outermost covering, this number 10 is the capsule. Inside the capsule we have cortex, adrenal cortex, which is labeled number 11. Inside the cortex we have number 12, which is medulla. And these cortex and medulla, these are two layers of the adrenal gland, and we will talk about their secretions later on. Now this is our adrenal gland, labeled number 13. Then in abdomen we have pancreas. This is labeled number 13, is the pancreas. Now pancreas has it is exocrine gland and an endocrine gland. What are endocrine glands? Endocrine glands are glands which do not have ducts. They secrete their hormones directly into the blood, and those hormones, they travel through the blood to various organs, to their target cells, where they're going to have their effects. Pancreas, it also has exocrine part. Exocrine glands are those glands which have ducts, and those ducts, they open in the organ where the secretions are supposed to go. So the pancreatic duct, it opens in the small intestines, and the pancreatic enzymes are secreted through that duct in the small intestine. That is the exocrine part of the pancreas. Over here we are talking about the endocrine part. The endocrine part of the pancreas is known as islets of Langerhans. Islets of Langerhans, they secrete insulin, and then they also secrete another hormone which is known as glucagon. Insulin is secreted by the beta cells, and the glucagon is secreted by the alpha cells. So this is number 13. It is pancreas. and islets of Langerhans. These are the endocrine portion, and they make the endocrine portion of the pancreas. Excuse me. Now let's move down. We have ovaries. So this central portion is the uterus, and this tube extending from the uterus is known as the fallopian tube or the uterine tube, and this portion of is known as the fimbria, and under this tube, this pale structure is the ovary. So ovaries, they also are part of the endocrine system. In males, we have testes, this labeled number 16. These are the testes. 16 is the testes and 18 is the epididymis. So you have to be able to recognize these structures. Let's move on. Let's go over this slide. This is hypothalamus, and hanging from the hypothalamus we have infundibulum is the pituitary gland. So this is the infundibulum and this is pituitary gland. Pituitary gland has two lobes. It has anterior lobe, which is also known as adenohypophysis, because it is composed of glandular tissue. And then this is a posterior lobe. Posterior lobe is also known as neurohypophysis. Now let's look at this. The posterior pituitary gland is known as neurohypophysis because it is not a true gland. The hormones it contains are actually synthesized in the hypothalamus. In the hypothalamus, we have supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. These nuclei, they synthesize oxytocin and ADH, and these hormones, they travel down these nerve axons and they are stored in the posterior pituitary. So posterior pituitary is actually a storage area, and then when action potential travels down these axons, these hormones are released into the blood. And this track, which is coming from the hypothalamus traveling in the infundibulum and then to the posterior pituitary, this is known as hypothalamic hypophyseal tract. You have to know the name of this tract, and you also have to know the name of the nuclei. Now let's move on to the anterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary, it is a true gland, and hypothalamus, it secretes some hormones. Those hormones are secreted by the hypothalamus into the blood. We have hypophyseal portal system. Hypophyseal portal system, it connects two types of capillaries, and it is present over here. So in the hypophyseal portal system, in the blood, the hypothalamic hormones, they travel down to the pituitary, and then the pituitary gland, under the influence of those hormones, it synthesizes and secretes six types of hormones. So this is important to know, that interior pituitary, the hormones from the hypothalamus are traveling via blood, and the system is known as hypophyseal portal system, whereas in the posterior pituitary, the hormones, they travel in the nerve axons, and this tract is known as hypothalamic hypophyseal tract. Okay, now let's move on to this diagram. This is thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is present on the anterior surface below the larynx. So if you look at this, this is thyroid cartilage. This is located where the Adam's apple is, which is more prominent in males. So this is the location of the thyroid gland. It has two lateral lobes which are connected by isthmus. The central portion is known as isthmus of thyroid, and then these are the lobes. Now if we move posteriorly, so this is trachea, where you can see these tracheal cartilage rings. Now on the back side, this is the back side of the thyroid gland, the posterior surface. You can see parathyroid glands. They are embedded in the thyroid gland. So sometimes it happens then when during surgery. Sometimes these parathyroid glands, they accidentally get removed when some person is having a thyroid surgery. So this is a complication of thyroid surgery, that sometimes accidentally parathyroid glands are removed as well. So these four which you can see over here are parathyroid glands. Now we covered the head and then the neck. Now let's move to the abdomen. In the abdomen, we have adrenal glands. We have two adrenal glands. So we have one thyroid gland, one pituitary gland, 4 to 8 parathyroid glands. Now we have two adrenal glands, one on each side. They're sitting on top of the kidneys. They're kind of triangular in shape. And as we discussed on the previous slide, that outermost covering is the capsule. Each adrenal gland is covered with a capsule, and then inside the capsule, the outer layer of the adrenal gland is known as the cortex. Inside the cortex, we have medulla. So this is our adrenal gland, one on each side. And then in the abdomen, we have pancreas. Pancreas, it has exocrine portion and endocrine portion. The endocrine portion of the pancreas is known as islets of Langerhans. These are scattered kind of islands scattered in the pancreatic tissue, and they contain the cells which make insulin and glucagon. There are two types of cells. Alpha cells make glucagon, beta cells make insulin. Then pancreas also has an exocrine part. So this duct which you can see, this is the duct through which the exocrine secretion of the pancreas, they are secreted into the small intestines, into the duodenum part of the small intestines. So this is our pancreas. Now let's move lower. So this is the uterus in the middle, and you can see this each tube extending from each side of the uterus. This is known as fallopian tube or uterine tube. And this pale structure is the ovary. Ovaries are also part of the endocrine system. They secrete estrogens and progesterone. And then these testes also make part of the endocrine system. Testes are hanging in the scrotum, and these also are part of endocrine system. They secrete testosterone. Now let's talk about the endocrine histology. So what we expect from you, we expect that you have to be able to recognize the endocrine organ under the microscope. You have to name the endocrine gland, and then you have to know which hormone is secreted by that endocrine gland, and then you have to know about the pathologies which can go wrong, what can go wrong in that gland. So this is how pituitary gland, it appears under the microscope. This darker staining area, which is labeled number 1, this is the anterior pituitary. Notice it is kind of bigger than the posterior pituitary, and it is also darker staining. If you look in a more better view, you will be able to see glandular tissues. There will be circular, you will find circles which are lined by cuboidal epithelium, because it is made up of glandular tissue. And the secretions of the anterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary, it responds to the hypothalamus, hormones releasing and inhibiting hormones. Releasing and inhibiting hormones, they are synthesized in the hypothalamus, and then hypothalamus secretes those hormones in the blood, and then they reach the anterior pituitary. Under the influence of those releasing and inhibiting hormones, the hormones of the anterior pituitary are regulated. So these are the hormones, 6 hormones which anterior pituitary secretes. First of all, we have growth hormone. Growth hormone, they are secreted by the somatotropic cells. So remember, for each type of hormone, there are specific cells present in the interior pituitary, and they synthesize that specific hormone. So growth hormone, it is secreted by the somatotropic cells. And just for your as a reminder, so growth hormone, the hypothalamus secretes growth hormone releasing hormone and growth hormone inhibiting hormones. So two hormones are secreted by the hypothalamus which affect growth hormone, which regulate growth hormone, releasing hormone and inhibiting hormone. So under the influence of releasing hormone, anterior pituitary, the somatotropic cells in the anterior pituitary, they secrete growth hormone. So this is your second. We have recognized the organ, we have recognized the hormone, and in your then you can go over what are the general effects of the growth hormone. I will not go over over those in this slide. So what can go wrong? What are the pathologies? If there is a term known as pituitary dwarfism in children, so if there is a deficiency of growth hormone in the children, there is a condition which is known as pituitary dwarfism. It means that the child, he is small in stature. He does not reach his full height. So if you look at this first person in this photograph, this person when he was young, he did not have enough growth hormone in his body. As a result, he did not attain his full height. So this is an example of pituitary dwarfism. And remember that pituitary dwarfism can be because anterior pituitary is not making enough growth hormone, or it can be because of some problem in the hypothalamus, that there is problem with growth hormone releasing hormone. All right, then what can go wrong if there is too much growth hormone? So this arrow facing upward, it going upward is telling you that what happens when there is hyper secretion of growth hormone. So in children, those children, they become giants. So this gigantism in children, and this person, he had too much growth hormone when he was a child. As a result, he is extra tall. And what happens if there is too much growth hormone in adults? Because in adults, the bones, the epiphyseal plates of the long bones have already closed, so that person cannot grow in height, that person cannot become taller. But what happens, you cannot see in this photograph, what happens is the facial bones and the bones of the hand, these bones, they become thick and enlarged, and the facial, you can see the features change, they become gross. Now this is the first secretion of the anterior pituitary. Now the second hormone secreted by the anterior pituitary is thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone, it is also regulated by the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus secretes a hormone known as thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH. Under the influence of TRH, thyroid stimulating hormone, it secretes TSH, and TSH is secreted by the thyrotropic cells. Now we have recognized the organ and we have recognized the hormone. Thyroid hormone has many metabolic effects and many effects in the body, which you can go over. In there is a table in your Pearson e-text. Now let's see what are the pathologies. If there is too less secretion, which is known as hypothyroidism, the condition is known as mixed edema. So that person will basically have low metabolism, and then there are many effects which these people, there are many symptoms. Then if there is too much thyroid hormone, it is known as hyperthyroidism, because when there is too much thyroid stimulating hormone, as a result the thyroid gland will make too much of the thyroid hormone, and we will call the condition hypothyroidism. Similarly, if there is too I think I said the opposite. So under the influence of thyroid stimulating hormone, the thyroid gland is going to secrete thyroid hormone. So it can be either too much or too little. And if there is too much, it is known as hypothyroidism, and there is a disease known as Graves' disease, in which the antibodies, they mimic thyroid stimulating hormone. So it is not actually the thyroid stimulating hormone which is causing the thyroid gland to secrete too much thyroid hormone. Actually, these people, they make some antibodies against which the thyroid gland detects as TSH, and it starts making thyroid hormone. And then the third hormone of the anterior pituitary is the adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. Now the hypothalamus is making CRH, corticotropic releasing hormone. Under the influence of CRH, anterior pituitary, it secretes ACTH. And ACTH, as the name is telling you, adreno, it goes to the adrenal glands, and it causes hormones to be released from the adrenal gland. So deficiency of ACTH is rare, but when there is too much ACTH, we have a disease known as Cushing's disease. Just remember, when there is too much ACTH, there will be too much hormones of the adrenal gland. And those too much hormones of the adrenal gland, they result in Cushing's disease. Then we have follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So these two hormones, they affect the gonads. Gonads, what are gonads? The testes and the ovaries are known as gonads. So the hypothalamus, it secretes gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. Gonadotropin releasing hormone is coming from the hypothalamus, and it causes the anterior pituitary to secrete follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, and this is made by the gonadotropic cells. And what happens if there is too less of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone? There is failure of sexual maturation. And if there is too much of these hormones, there are no important effects. Now, before I move on, okay, now then the sixth hormone produced, let's talk about prolactin, and then I want to make a point. So prolactin, it is secreted by the anterior pituitary hormone. Now, this is interesting that hypothalamus actually synthesizes a hormone known as prolactin inhibiting hormone. So prolactin inhibiting hormone is secreted by the hypothalamus, and as the name is telling you, that hormone inhibits the secretion of prolactin from the anterior pituitary. So when prolactin inhibiting hormone is absent, then anterior pituitary, it makes prolactin. And prolactin, as the name is telling you, lactin, it makes milk. It is for milk production. When there is too little prolactin, there is poor milk production in the nursing woman. When there is too much prolactin, there is inappropriate milk production, which is known as galactoria. So whenever you say you see lact, L-A-C-T, it means something related to milk. So galactoria is inappropriate milk production. And then there can be problem with periods in the females. There is the menses, they might not be regular. And then there is impotence in males. So these are all prolactin. Now over here I want to again say a term. There are some tropic hormones, and then there is another term, trophic hormones. So what are tropic hormones? Tropic hormones are the hormones which which regulate the secretion of other hormones, right? So all of the hormones of the hypothalamus which act on the anterior pituitary, they are tropic hormones. Okay, and then from the anterior pituitary, if we see this growth hormone, it is not a tropic hormone. Okay, the thyroid stimulating hormone is a tropic hormone because it is affecting thyroid gland. Adrenocorticotropic hormone is a tropic hormone because it is affecting adrenal glands. Then follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, they are tropic hormones because they affect the ovaries and the testes. So and then again, so these four are the trophic hormones. Then you will also hear a term, trophic hormones. So the spelling of tropic and trophic are different. Trophic is T-R-O-P-H-I-C. So these are the hormones which these, when they act on the other glands, they also increase the size of the gland. They increase the cells. They also proliferate those glands. Okay. Now let's move on to the next slide. So these are the names I've written like. Now let's go over the posterior pituitary. This label number 2 over here is the posterior pituitary gland. Posterior pituitary gland is also known as neurohypophysis because it is not a true gland. If it was a better magnification or a clear view, you will see that you will not find glandular tissue in the posterior pituitary gland. In the posterior pituitary gland, there are axons of the nerves, and then there is supporting tissue which is known as glial tissue, supporting nervous tissue known as glial tissue. So, and the hormones which are secreted by the posterior pituitary, they are synthesized by nuclei in the hypothalamus, and they travel in the axons or in the nerve fibers, and then they are stored in the posterior pituitary in those axons. And what is the stimulus for the secretion of the posterior pituitary? The action potential. It travels down those nerve axons, and it causes the release of the hormones of the posterior pituitary into the blood. We call those hormones because they are secreted directly into the blood. And now we have identified the organ. Labeled number 2 is posterior pituitary or neurohypophysis. Now what are the hormones produced by this gland? They are known as antidiuretic, which is antidiuretic hormone. It is synthesized by supraoptic neurons. There are supraoptic nuclei present in the hypothalamus. They synthesize antidiuretic hormone, and that antidiuretic hormone, it travels down the nerve fibers and it is stored in the posterior pituitary. This antidiuretic hormone, diuresis means production of urine. So anti means that it is preventing large amount of urine from being formed. So what is the function of this antidiuretic hormone? When it is present, it acts on the renal tubules. Renal means kidney. It acts on the kidney tubules, and it causes reabsorption of water back into the blood. So as a result, the urine volume, it decreases. So antidiuretic hormone, when it is present, the amount of the urine, the volume of the urine is decreased because it causes reabsorption of water. So now let's go over the pathology. So what happens when there is too little of antidiuretic? So as you can imagine, I want you to take a moment and think. When an antidiuretic hormone is absent, the water from the urine will not be reabsorbed back into the blood. As a result, we will have large amount of urine. This condition is known as diabetes insipidus. Why diabetes? Because in diabetic patients also, what happens that they pee a lot. Because of osmosis, they make large volumes of urine, and they have to go and use the bathroom again and again. So because of that, from there, this disease got the name diabetes. So diabetes insipidus is related to reduced amounts of ADH. And then what will happen if there is too much of ADH? Now you can imagine that when there is too much of ADH, it means the kidney tubules are going to absorb large amounts of water from the urine which it is making. As a result, there will be reduced amount of urine. The volume of the urine will decrease, and urine will be more concentrated. So this is known as SIADH, syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. Alright, then the second hormone which is secreted by the posterior pituitary is known as oxytocin. Oxytocin, it is synthesized by the paraventricular nuclei in the hypothalamus. And this oxytocin, it is also stored in the nerve fibers in the posterior pituitary, and it is secreted. And so we do not know about the pathologies of this hormone. This slide, it is a thyroid gland. This is how thyroid gland appears under the microscope and what you're supposed to recognize. How will we say that this is a thyroid gland? So thyroid gland, it consists of thyroid follicles. This over bracket, it is enclosing a thyroid follicle. These round structures with pinkish substance inside them, and lined by these cuboidal cells. These are cuboidal cells. You cannot see very clearly in over here, but we can imagine these are cuboidal because cuboidal cells have somewhat rounded nuclei. So this is a thyroid follicle, and these thyroid follicles, they are present in the thyroid gland. So when we see structures like this, we can say this is a slide of thyroid gland, and you have to be able to recognize thyroid follicle. And then this pinkish structure inside the thyroid follicle, this is colloid. And then This thyroid follicle, it is lined by cuboidal epithelium. This cuboidal epithelium is also known as follicular cell. These follicular cells, they synthesize the thyroid hormone, and then they store them inside the thyroid follicle attached to the colloid. The thyroid hormones are T3 and T4, and then these are the effects of hyposecretion and hypersecretion. I took this chart from your Pearson e-text. You can go over this. By and large, thyroid gland, it increases the metabolism, and it produces heat, and then it affects many systems. It is very important to have normal thyroid hormone levels in the body. Now let's see what is this label number 6. These are the parafollicular cells. These parafollicular cells, they are present between the thyroid follicles, and they are also known as C cells. They secrete a hormone known as calcitonin. Now this is a slide of pancreas. Right now, pancreas consists of islets of Langerhans. Like I said earlier, the islets of Langerhans, they make the endocrine part of the pancreas. So these islets of Langerhans, they are scattered in the pancreas. So these lighter staining, these structures over here, these lighter staining, these are the islets of Langerhans, and they contain alpha cells and beta cells. Alpha cells secrete glucagon, and beta cells, they secrete insulin. Then the majority of the pancreas, it is made up of acinar cells. Acinar cells, they synthesize pancreatic enzymes, and this is the exocrine part of the pancreas. And this is the pancreatic duct. So the pancreatic enzymes and the bicarbonate, it also makes bicarbonate. It goes in the pancreatic duct, and pancreatic duct, it secretes this enzyme directly into the small intestines. So this number 2 and 3 is the exocrine part of the pancreas. Number 2 are the acinar cells. 3 are the pancreatic ducts. And these lighter staining circles scattered among the acinar cells, these are the islets of Langerhans. Now let's see what will happen if there is too much secretion. So too much secretion of insulin, it is known as hyperinsulinism, and it can happen if there is tumor of the islets. And then if there is too little insulin, we know we get a disease which is known as diabetes mellitus. Actually, diabetes mellitus type 1 is because of hyposecretion of insulin, and diabetes mellitus type 2 is because of hypoactivity of insulin. So this is, and then you can also see what will happen if there is too much glucagon and too little glucagon. So insulin, its primary function, it is to remove the blood glucose and move it inside the cells. Right. So and the stimulus for secretion of insulin is when there is too much glucose in the blood. It causes the beta cells to secrete insulin. And what is the stimulus of glucagon? Glucagon is when there is too little uh, glucose in the blood. So glucagon and insulin, they act opposite to each other. When the amount of glucose in the blood is less, glucagon is secreted. And what is the primary function of glucagon? It increases the blood sugar. It increases the glucose in the blood, the sugar in the blood. Now this is a slide of adrenal gland. So you have to be able to recognize this. Adrenal gland, like I said before, at the outermost covering is the capsule. It is labeled number 4 over here. This is the capsule, and inside the capsule we have adrenal cortex. These layers labeled from 5 to 7, these are the layers of the cortex. Layer number 5 is zona glomerulosa. Layer number 6 is zona fasciculata. Layer number 7 is zona reticularis. All three of these zones, they have different secretions. And then this labeled number 8 inside the cortex is the medulla. Medulla has different secretion. Now, this layer 5 or the zona glomerulosa, it secretes mineralocorticoids. The hormones are known as mineralocorticoids, and the primary mineralocorticoid is aldosterone. And so if there is too much secretion of mineralocorticoids by this zone, it is known as aldosteronism. And if there is too little, we have a disease known as Addison's disease. Now let's go to zona fasciculata and zona reticularis. Both of these layers, they secrete glucocorticoids and gonadocorticoids. So the primary glucocorticoid is known as cortisol, and the gonadocorticoids, they are also known as adrenal androgens. They resemble sex hormones like testosterone. And if there is too much of glucocorticoid or cortisol, the disease is known as Cushing's syndrome. And if there is too little of glucocorticoid, the disease is known as Addison's disease. I want you to notice that in Addison's disease, there is hyposecretion of mineralocorticoids and hyposecretion of glucocorticoids. So both of these layers, it means all the layers of this gland, they are affected in Addison's disease. And if they now let's come to gonadocorticoids. Like I said, these are the androgens, and they resemble testosterone or estrogen, and they're converted into testosterone and estrogen actually. If there is too much secretion of gonadocorticoids, there is masculinization in the females. In the males, there is no effect. And of hyposecretion, there is no known disease because they are not the primary androgens. The primary androgens, they are secreted by the ovaries and the testes. So this is the adrenal gland. You have to be able to recognize it. And now the adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla, it secretes catecholamines. Now adrenal medulla, it is a neuroendocrine gland. What is a neuroendocrine gland? Neuroendocrine gland is a gland which is part of the nervous system and also part of the endocrine system. Hypothalamus is also a neuroendocrine gland. I forgot to mention that, because hypothalamus, it receives stimuli from the nerves, from the nervous system, and then it secretes hormones. So it is known as neuroendocrine gland. Similarly, adrenal medulla is also neuroendocrine gland, and its secretions, its hormones are known as epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are secreted in the blood. When the presympathetic nerve fibers, they stimulate the adrenal medulla. As a result, the adrenal medulla, it secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine into the blood. So if there is too much epinephrine and non-epinephrine, we get a response which we say prolonged fight or flight response, because these hormones, they increase in the blood when some person is in an emergency or a scary situation. That person is like, either they decide I have to run away or I have to fight back. So these are the hormones which are responsible for fight or flight response. And if there is too less secretion, it is unimportant. If adrenal medulla is not secreting too much epinephrine or norepinephrine, we will not see any effects. Okay, so now we went over the slides. So the next page in your manual, page 18, it talks about the endocrine physiology. I will just go over the summary. You can read it from there. So let's go over this diagram. This is the posterior pituitary, and you can see this is the hypothalamus. Okay, over here will be the thalamus if you look at the brain section. So this is hypothalamus, which is inferior to the thalamus. And in hypothalamus, we have paraventricular nuclei, and then we have supraoptic nuclei. These supraoptic nuclei, please notice they are located above the optic chiasma. That is why they get the name supraoptic nuclei. So these are supraoptic, these are paraventricular. Paraventricular cells, they are synthesizing oxytocin. And supraoptic nuclei, they are synthesizing ADH. How I remember it like oxytocin has O in it, but it is synthesized by paraventricular nuclei, not by the supraoptic. You can just figure out how you want to remember it. So these hormones, they're synthesized here and then they travel in this. This is known as hypothalamic hypophyseal tract, which runs in the infundibulum. You have to know the name of this tract. And then they come here and they're stored in the posterior pituitary, and under the influence of the action potential or the nerve impulse, these hormones are released in the blood. Okay, this oxytocin and ADH. So this is posterior pituitary. Okay, this is the diagram. This is the thalamus and this is the hypothalamus. All right, now this is anterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary is also under the influence of the hypothalamus. Anterior pituitary is a true endocrine gland. It is known as adenohypophysis. And hypothalamus, it synthesizes some hormones which are releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones. So these, you can see the names of these hormones over here. I took this diagram from your Pearson e-text. So these hormones, they enter the blood. This is the hypophyseal portal system. Hypophyseal portal system, it consists of two capillary beds which are joined together. So those hormones, they enter the blood in this hypophyseal portal system and reach the anterior pituitary, and then anterior pituitary, it secretes these 6 hormones which we already went over. So in this posterior pituitary, it is a kind of extension of the hypothalamus, right? And whereas anterior pituitary, embryologically, their origin is different. It is originating in the embryo from the oral mucosa, whereas this is a part of the nervous system. Now this is just to give you an overview of the endocrine glands. We have talked about all of them. I want you to notice over here. So let me just uh, go over all of the names of the endocrine glands. So first of all, let's in the brain. In the brain we have pineal gland. Pineal gland, it is present posteriorly. As you can see, it is present posteriorly, and this pineal gland is responsible for the day and the night cycle, and it is related to the melatonin, right? And this is not under pituitary gland. These light blue boxes, these are the glands which are not under pituitary control. Okay. Now let me go over another this light blue box. So pancreas, it is not also under pituitary control. What controls pancreas? Glucose level. If there is too much glucose in the blood, pancreas secretes insulin. When the level of the glucose in the blood, it falls down, pancreas secretes glucagon. So this is known as humoral control. It is under the influence of glucose. It is not under the influence of pituitary gland. Now let me go to this. So these are the parathyroid glands. Parathyroid glands are also not under the influence of pituitary gland. Parathyroid glands, they respond to calcium. Just remember, the main function of the parathyroid hormone is to maintain blood calcium. So when there is low blood calcium in the blood, the parathyroid hormone is secreted, and that parathyroid gland, it works to bring the level of calcium to improve the level of calcium in the blood. It maintains calcium blood levels. And then this zona glomerulosa of the adrenal gland. This is also not under the influence of the pituitary gland. It responds to low blood volume, low blood pressure, low sodium and high potassium. So this is also not under pituitary influence. Zona glomerulosa under normal condition. When under stress conditions, then the pituitary gland, the ACTH secreted by the pituitary gland, it becomes important in secretions of zona glomerulosa. But under normal conditions, it responds to low blood volume, low blood pressure, low sodium and high potassium. And then we have adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla, it also is not under pituitary control. It is a neuroendocrine gland, and when the presympathetic nerve fibers, they stimulate adrenal medulla, it secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. So let me just revise for you. So the pineal gland, it responds to day and night cycle and to melatonin. It is not under pituitary control. In the neck, The parathyroid hormones are not under pituitary control. In the abdomen, the pancreas is not under pituitary control. In the adrenal glands, the zona glomerulosa of the cortex, which is the outermost layer of the cortex, it is not under pituitary control under normal conditions. And adrenal medulla, it is not under pituitary control. So the rest of the endocrine glands, they are influenced by the secretions of the pituitary, and pituitary in turn is influenced by the secretions of the hypothalamus. So you can just imagine that hypothalamus is the boss. It is making, releasing and inhibiting hormones. Those hormones, they go to the pituitary. So over here we are talking about anterior pituitary. Okay, anterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary, it secretes certain hormones. It secretes thyroid stimulating hormone, which causes the secretion of thyroid hormones from the thyroid gland, and then it secretes uh, uh, it secretes ACTH, which affects the zona fasciculata and the zona reticularis of the adrenal glands, and then it secretes the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, which cause release of estrogen, progesterone and testosterone from the gonads, ovaries and the testes. So this is like a summary of the endocrine glands. Let's move ahead. It says the same. I thought maybe written, if I write it like this, it will be easier to remember for you. So this is, just remember, this is hypothalamic anterior pituitary system. Don't get confused. So this is hypothalamus. These are the hormones which are secreted by hypothalamus. All of these hormones are tropic hormones. And then they influence the anterior pituitary, and anterior pituitary is secreting these 6 hormones: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4 of these hormones, they are under the influence of the anterior pituitary, thyroid gland, adrenal gland and ovaries, and these are the hormones which are acting on these. As a result, thyroid gland is secreting thyroid hormone, zona fasciculata and reticularis are secreting glucocorticoids and gonadocorticoids, and ovaries and testes, they secrete estrogen, progesterone and testosterone. So two of the hormones, growth hormone and prolactin, they do not influence other endocrine glands. They are also secreted by the anterior pituitary. Now let's go back to the manual. So this is on the page 19 of your manual, and you're supposed to fill this. So let me quickly go over. So this is hypothalamic posterior pituitary. So this is the hypothalamus. This bracket is the hypothalamus, right? And just see, this is thalamus, and then anterior to the thalamus is the hypothalamus, and this is where this small square is where the pituitary gland is hanging from the hypothalamus through its infundibulum, and then it has 2 lobes. So this one is the posterior pituitary lobe. This is hypothalamus. These are paraventricular nuclei. These are supraoptic nuclei, and this is the hypothalamic hypophyseal tract. This is posterior pituitary or the neurohypophysis, which is a storage area for the hormones. Hormone released are oxytocin and ADH. And now the oxytocin, the stimulus is the action potential, which travels down these nerve fibers in the hypothalamic hypophyseal tract. And the target organs of oxytocin are the uterus and the breast, and the functions are uterine contractions and the milk ejection. It helps in the initiation of the labor. During at the end of the pregnancy, when the labor is about to set in, the oxytocin, it increases in amount. And then its other function is milk ejection, not milk formation, milk ejection. Okay. And the hypo secretion is not known, hyper is not known. Then let's move on to ADH. The stimulus is again an action potential. Target organs of antidiuretic hormone are kidney tubules. So if antidiuretic hormone is present, anti means that it is against the production of urine. So it is going to absorb water back from the renal tubules into the blood. So what is the function? To reabsorb water. What happens when there is hyposecretion of ADH? The condition is known as diabetes insipidus. When there is hypersecretion, the condition is known as SIADH, syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. Let's move on to next page. So this, I just put this chart here. This is present in your Pearson text just to help you. if you want to revise from here. All right, so this is page 20. Again, this is now we have moved to anterior pituitary, hypothalamic anterior pituitary thyroid system. So this is the thyroid gland, this is trachea, this is larynx, this is thyroid gland, this is anterior. Okay, this is art of aorta, because you are also in this lab, in the lab practical you will be also asked about the vessels. All right, so let's go over here. These are the thyroid follicles, right? And this pink substance inside the thyroid follicle is the colloid. And these, the cells lining the thyroid follicles are known as the cuboidal follicular cells. These are the cells which synthesize thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormones are T3 and T4. So now let's go over this. This is very easy if you just, it is very easy to remember these small figures. So hypothalamus is secreting TRH, and then under the influence of TRH, anterior pituitary, it secretes TSH. Under the influence of TSH, the thyroid gland, it secretes T3 and T4, and target cells are present all over the body. Okay, and now what is the stimulus for the hypothalamus? Neural stimulus. And what is the function? Function of TRH, it is a tropic hormone. It means it causes secretion of TSH from the anterior pituitary. Target is the anterior pituitary, thyrotropic cells in the anterior pituitary. Now the stimulus for TSH is TRH, and what is the function of TSH? It causes secretion of T3 and T4. It is also a tropic hormone. It is also a trophic hormone. It also increases the size of the gland. And what are the target cells? The follicular cells of the thyroid gland are the target of TSH. Then we have T3 and T4. What is the stimulus? Thyroid stimulating hormone. And what are the target organs of tissues? Almost every cell in the body. Function, increase metabolism, and then I will share a chart. You can see there are lots of functions of thyroid hormone. And what is the hypo condition is known as myxedema. Hyper is known as Graves' disease. That chart I already shared when we went over the histology. Now let's move over. So this is again that. This is from your Pearson e-text. Now other thyroid hormone, other thyroid hormone, we also have parafollicular cells, the C cells which are present between the thyroid follicles. This is the thyroid follicle, and these are parafollicular cells, and the hormone they secrete is known as calcitonin. What is the stimulus for secretion of calcitonin? High calcium in the blood. When the levels of the calcium in the blood um, are high, it is a stimulus for secretion of calcitonin. Target organs or tissues are the skeleton. And what are the functions? We are not very sure about the physiological functions, but they are used in pharmacology. In pharmacology, in some diseases, this calcitonin, it is used. And we don't know about the effects of the hypo and the hypersecretion. Now let's move on to next page. This is page number 22. Now we are moving to the posterior surface of the thyroid gland. Posteriorly embedded in the thyroid gland, we have 4 to 8 parathyroid glands. So what is the stimulus for secretion from the parathyroid gland? It is low blood calcium. Okay. For calcitonin, it was high blood calcium. For parathyroid, it is low blood calcium. So parathyroid glands, they are not influenced by the hypothalamic pituitary axis. Okay, there. And under the influence of low blood calcium, parathyroid glands, they secrete parathyroid hormone. Now, parathyroid hormone have 3 target organs. This is where they act. From the bones, they cause absorption of calcium from the bones. In the bones, we have cells which are known as osteoclasts. Osteoclasts, they actually eat the bone and release the minerals into the blood. So the minerals released are calcium and phosphate, PO4, calcium and PO4. And they are released into the blood because the purpose of the parathyroid hormone is to maintain the blood calcium levels. Okay, so it is going to correct the blood calcium levels. And then it acts on the kidneys. In kidneys, it causes reabsorption of calcium in the renal tubules, and then it acts on the intestines. It does not directly act on the intestines. It causes activation of vitamin D. Vitamin D is present in inactive form. It is activated in the kidneys, and then that vitamin D causes reabsorption of calcium from the intestines. So these are the functions of the parathyroid hormone, and because of this you also now know why when you buy milk from the grocery store it says vitamin D added. So they also add vitamin D to the milk. Why? So calcium can be reabsorbed from the intestines, and all of these three, they lead to increased absorption of increased levels of calcium in the blood. So you can go over this chart. I filled it up for you. So when there is hyposecretion, when can hyposecretion happen? When there is some trauma to the parathyroid glands, and like I said previously, sometimes accidentally they get removed in thyroid surgery. So as a result, there are low levels of parathyroid hormone in the body, and they will affect the homeostasis of calcium, and so it leads to hypocalcemia, and then the symptoms will be according due to hypocalcemia. And then what will happen in hypersecretion? The condition is known as hyperparathyroidism, and the swear form, the disease is known as osteitis fibrosa cystica. Okay. And in which, if you look at the X-ray of the people who have this disease, you will see lighter staining spots in the bones because too much bone has been eaten, because there was too much parathyroid hormone causing increased activity of the osteoblast. Now let's move ahead. This is page 23. Now we have discussed, we already said that the first hormone which the adrenal pituitary was affecting was the thyroid. And then we went over parathyroid, and now we are coming to the abdomen. In the abdomen we have adrenal glands. These are the adrenal glands. This photograph is present in your Pearson e-text. Outermost in each adrenal, we have two adrenal glands sitting on top of each kidney, and each adrenal gland is encapsulated. The outermost covering is a capsule. Then there is cortex and there is medulla. The outer layer of the adrenal gland is known as adrenal cortex. Cortex has three layers: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and zona reticularis. Then inside the cortex there is zona medulla. Now this is hypothalamic interior pituitary adrenal system, and we are going to discuss each zones of the cortex. So the first zone of the cortex is the zona glomerulosa. And zona glomerulosa is basically, it responds to, under normal condition, there is a system known as renin angiotensin aldosterone system. So there is a hormone renin which is secreted by the kidneys, and that hormones, it converts angiotensinogen which is present in the blood in lung capillaries. That angiotensinogen, it is converted into angiotensin 2. This angiotensin 2, there are many steps which are involved here, okay, which are not written here. So basically renin, it causes production of angiotensin 2. That angiotensin 2, it acts on zona glomerulosa, and zona glomerulosa, it secretes aldosterone. And why do kidneys secrete renin? What is the stimulus? The stimulus is low blood volume, low sodium, high potassium. So under normal condition, under the influence of this, the renin angiotensin aldosterone system, renin angiotensin aldosterone system becomes activated, and we get aldosterone, and that aldosterone, it causes reabsorption of sodium from the renal tubules. And when sodium is reabsorbed, water follows the sodium. So as a result, our body, it corrects the blood volume and the blood pressure. And what is the hypo? Hypo is known as Addison disease. Please recall a few slides back we discussed that Addison's disease is when all the layers of the adrenal gland, they are hypofunctioning, or the cortex of the adrenal cortex. All the three layers of the adrenal cortex are hypofunctioning. It is known as Addison's disease. And the hyper, when there is too much of aldosterone, it is known as aldosteronism. And I also want to mention that these mineralocorticoids or aldosterone, they are essential for life. Under the condition when there is stress, then this will change. Then ACTH also becomes the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. They become they are more effective. Now let's move on to next page. This is page 24. Now we are talking about zona fasciculata. Zona fasciculata, it is under the influence of hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. Hypothalamus is secreting CRH, anterior pituitary secretes ACTH, and this ACTH acts on zona fasciculata, and it secretes the hormone glucocorticoids and adrenal androgens. The primary glucocorticoid is known as cortisol, and they have effects on many cells of the body. So this, I have filled up this chart for you. You can pause the video and you can go over it. Now let me move ahead. This is page 25. Now over here we are talking about zona reticularis of the adrenal cortex. So this is also under the influence of hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. The hypothalamus secretes CRH, anterior pituitary secretes ACTH, and then under the influence of zona of ACTH, zona reticularis, it secretes adrenal androgens and glucocorticoids. And you can go over this. I have tried to fill this for you. Now let me move ahead. This is from your Pearson e-text, and it gives you a summary of mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and gonadocorticoids, and how they are regulated, and what are the target organs, and what is the effect of hypersecretion and hyposecretion. And then this is the adrenal medulla. We will go over adrenal medulla after this slide, so you can see the summary from here. Now let me move ahead. All right, so before we go to adrenal medulla, this is from your lab manual. You can go over it. Let me just give you the summary. So under the influence of CRH, before the production of ACTH, a bigger molecule is made. That bigger molecule is known as POMC, pro-opiomelanocortin. Okay, and this POMC, it is split into three compounds. One is known as endorphins. Endorphins, they are the feel-good hormone. The second is the ACTH, which goes to the adrenal gland, to the adrenal cortex. Then the third one is the MSH, or the melanocyte stimulating hormone. This this hormone stimulates the production of melanin. Melanin is responsible for the tanning. Brown people and black people have more melanin compared to the lighter skinned people. So this you can read from your manual. Let me move ahead. So this is the adrenal medulla. We discussed the three layers of the adrenal cortex. Let me quickly summarize. Adrenal cortex has three layers: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. Zona glomerulosa, under normal conditions, it is stimulated by renin-angiotensin system, which causes the release of aldosterone from the zona glomerulosa. I'm sorry. And the zona fasciculata and the zona reticularis, they are under the influence of the pituitary gland. ACTH secreted by the pituitary gland causes secretion of glucocorticoids and adrenal androgens. Now the inner to the cortex, we have adrenal medulla. This is adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla is a neuroendocrine gland. The preganglionic sympathetic nerve endings, they stimulate the adrenal medulla, and adrenal medulla, it secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. And from the previous chart, you can fill this. The target organs are wherever there are receptors for epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now let me move. Now this is we have discussed the adrenal gland. Now we are moving further down in the pelvis. We have ovaries, and then we have testes. So the hypothalamus, it releases gonadotropin releasing hormone. This is how it is written. You have to know this. The G is capital, the N is small. So GnRH is secreted by the hypothalamus. Then anterior pituitary, it secretes FSH and LH, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone under the influence of gonadotropin releasing hormone. And these FSH and LH, they act on testes and ovaries. The ovaries will secrete estrogen and progesterone, and testes will secrete testosterone. So this also I took from your Pearson e-text, and it is giving you the summary of these two hormones, and they're stimulated by GnRH, and these are the target organs, ovaries and the testes. And what happens when there is too little secretion of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone? There is failure of sexual maturation. And when there is too much stimulation, there are no important effects. So you can, from this chart, you can fill all of this. Let me move ahead. Okay, so now there is in your lab manual, you will find a page which talks about primary pathology, secondary pathology, and tertiary pathology. So primary pathology, these apply to hypothalamic, anterior pituitary, and the gland. So this is where the hypothalamus will come. If the problem is in, I'm starting from this point, okay? So if the problem is in the hypothalamus, it is tertiary condition. Hypothalamus is either making too little of its hormone, or it is making too much of its hormone. As a result, all of this line will be affected. For example, let me give you an example. For example, hypothalamus is making too much of TRH. What is TRH? Thyrotropin releasing hormone. So what will happen? That as a result, the anterior pituitary will make too much of TSH, too much of thyroid stimulating hormone. And as a result, the thyroid gland will make too much of thyroid hormones T3 and T4. So in tertiary pathology, TRH will be high, TSH will be high, T3, T4 will be high, right? And we call this tertiary pathology. And what is secondary pathology? If the problem is with the anterior pituitary. Now let's follow the same example. If I can write here, it will be maybe better. You will be able to know. So let's follow the example of the thyroid hormone. So this is TRH is being made by the hypothalamus, and then TSH is being made by the pituitary gland, right? And then thyroid hormones T3 and T4, they are being made by the thyroid gland. I'm only writing T3, there is also T4. Okay, let me write here. So, I'm sorry. So if there can be, if there is too much TRH, if TRH is too much, as a result, TSH will be too much. As a result, T3, T4 will be too much. So now just remember, whenever we do thyroid profile, we always check all these three: TRH, TSH, and T3, T4. So if all three are raised, we will say that the problem is hypothalamus. We will call it tertiary pathology. So now just just imagine a second scenario. The second scenario is in which there is no problem with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is normal. So it means that TRH is not raised. Okay, so just take it not raised for now. So, but the problem is with the anterior pituitary. Now, TSH is increased. TSH is increased. As a result, T3, T4 is increased. So now this is the picture when we will get, when we get thyroid profile done. So we will see that TRH is normal, it is not raised. TSH is raised and T3 is raised. So we will say that this seems to be secondary pathology, that the anterior pituitary seems to be the problem. Now just imagine a third scenario. The third scenario, let me choose the purple. So hypothalamus is normal, right? Anterior pituitary is normal, there is no problem, but we are having increased T3 and T4. So now we will say that it seems like that the primary disease or the primary pathology is in the thyroid gland. Maybe there is some thyroid tumor which is making too much T3 and T4. And then that thyroid hormone, I forgot to mention on the slides, the dotted line was for the negative feedback. So there is no negative, because of this negative feedback, they are either normal or low, but T3 and T4, they are raised. So now we will say this is primary pathology. Now let me go ahead. So this is the same if for all of these hormones. For the thyroid gland secretion, we will see how much is the thyroid hormone, how much is the TSH, how much is the TRH. For the secretions of the adrenal gland, for the glucocorticoids, we will see for the cortisol. Not for the androgens, usually don't make a problem because adrenal glands, they secrete very small amount of androgens. Majority are secreted by the testes and the ovaries. So for example, we have too much cortisol, then we will see how much is the ACTH, then we will see how much is the CRH. So we will follow this line. And similarly, for FSH and LH, if we will start with the hormones of the ovaries and the testes. If there is too much estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, then we will see what is the level of FSH and LH, and then we will see what is the level of GnRH. So these three which are affected by the anterior pituitary, this can be, if the problem is here, it is primary pathology. If the problem is here, this is secondary pathology. If the problem is here, this is tertiary pathology. Now let's move ahead. Now there are other hormones of the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary system, just like on the previous slide, the growth hormone. It is hypothalamus, it secretes growth hormone releasing hormone and growth hormone inhibiting hormone. And these hormones, they affect the secretion of growth hormone from the anterior pituitary. And growth hormone, it has, the target cells are liver, bone and cartilage, and then there are also other tissues. So this is, I took it from your Pearson text. You can take help from this chart to fill this. Now let me move ahead. The other hormone which is not under which is secreted by the anterior pituitary but does not affect other glands is the prolactin. So one is growth hormone and other is the prolactin. So similarly for prolactin, remember that hypothalamus inhibits the secretion of prolactin. So when PIH, prolactin inhibiting hormone, is absent, anterior pituitary will make prolactin. Prolactin acts on the breast and it causes milk production. Okay, remember oxytocin was ejection of milk, prolactin is production of milk. And then you can stop the video here and you can go over this. Now this is, I took this from your Pearson e-text. You can it summarizes all of the hormones of the anterior pituitary. So if you go over this chart, you can revise everything. Now, let's come to the pancreas. Pancreas, this is our pancreas. It is present in the abdomen. Let me remind you, it has an exocrine part and an endocrine part. The endocrine part is, it is the islets of Langerhans. Islets of Langerhans have two types of cells, the alpha cells, which secrete glucagon, and beta cells, which secrete insulin. So alpha cells, they secrete glucagon, and beta cells secrete insulin. Both of these types of cells are present in the islets of Langerhans. They make the endocrine portion of the pancreas. So now just imagine, let's start at this point. Now I have eaten a big meal and it contains lots of carbohydrates. As a result, after a while, those sugars, they get absorbed into the blood and blood glucose levels, they rise. As a result, my pancreas, it secretes insulin. Now that insulin, it causes the uptake of glucose by the cells. And in the liver, it causes synthesis of glycogen. Glycogen is how the carbohydrates are stored in the liver. Okay. And then as a result of this uptake of glucose by the cells and also by the liver, it means that glucose is moving inside the cells. The blood glucose levels, they come to normal. And then when a few hours have passed and I have not eaten anything again, my blood glucose levels, they fall, they become low. Now what happens? that now the alpha cells of the pancreas, they secrete glucagon, and that glucagon it acts on the liver. So important point to remember here is glucagon only affects the liver. And what does it do in the liver? In the liver, it causes breakdown of glycogen. And like I said before, glycogen is how glucose is stored. So when glycogen is broken down, the glucose is released into the blood, and then again my blood glucose levels go up. This is how my body maintains a balance. Okay, so when we are fasting, we don't just faint because of hypoglycemia, because we have this system going on. The insulin and the glucagon, they balance the blood glucose levels. All right, let me go to the next page. So this is page 32 in your lab manual. So there are some other tissues. They also secrete some hormones. You can go over these and go over this chart so you can know. So this is all of your lab exercise 1. If you have any questions, please email me, and have a nice rest of the day and best of luck for your exam.